Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you this morning.
Greetings, Dr. Paul. How are you this morning?
Good. I'm awful tired. I was digesting. I watched television for over an hour last night.
No.
I didn't want to miss anything, but I probably would have been better off, or at least I couldn't have been worse off. Maybe just gone to bed early or something. No, I found it interesting because it turns out that it's big news. I think it's very interesting. I was advised one time, a long time ago, that when you're having your own function, and that was back when equal time was a law. You know, if you have one person on, you have to have the other person on. And I guess with CNN being a little bit mixed up, they want to look like a better news station, so they're having this forum for the Republican candidates to show how independent-minded they are. And that was, I thought, I started off watching the program, and I didn't realize, it was for Republicans. I thought, well, they're just having town hall meetings, and they're going to offer to the various candidates. And I thought, holy man, this Trump is really good. He's really gotten the audience. But it turned out it was a Republican audience. It was practically his audience. Yeah. But for him, I think it was worthwhile. But it would go back to the question, really, should you give time to your competition? Yeah. Because I can't see how the Democrats benefit by that. Matter of fact, I'm not sure that CNN's going to get any credit for being more open-minded. Yeah. I think, and then of course they came back and they were strongly critical of what was going on, and for the most part it was proper decorum, and yet there were some questions from the audience, and they were challenging, so it wasn't so bad that I had to turn it off and leave. I did listen to it, try to learn something. But, still the big thing that they go after Trump because he's an idiot, and he still believes that there probably was rigging in the last election. Yeah. And since I lean strongly in that direction because I think almost all elections have some rigging going on. Yeah. If not the open rigging of the media, how they're always favoring one candidate over another. But that was the one that they hit him, and of course I think he defended themselves fairly well on that. But I'm sure the Democrats couldn't stand it. Yeah.
Well, it was interesting, and I think, CNN hasn't suddenly changed their spots and gone Republican. However, the media landscape has changed a bit now that Tucker Carlson is gone from Fox. It looks like CNN is trying to pick up some ratings, and I'm sure they won that slot. There's no question about it. There were a lot of viewers, as you suggested in your opening, at what cost? Because I think, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, some people weren't that awfully happy that CNN allowed a platform to President Trump. But overall, and I have to say, I only watched clips. I did not watch the whole thing. I have to confess. I don't have CNN on my TV. But from what I saw, the clips that I saw, it seemed to me that Trump demonstrated himself to be at the top of his game. This is the Trump that we remember from 2016, where he won by just rolling over Hillary, just steamrollering Hillary and using the greatest tool ever, which is humor. And that doesn't mean I liked everything he said. That doesn't mean that I don't have criticism. You and I criticized him for 4 years, pretty much nonstop. But when you look at it objectively, when you look at some of these clips objectively, two words come to mind: Joe Biden. Joe Biden could never do anything like this. And it just demonstrates to the American people, I think, and maybe just to his base, maybe that's all he has to worry about. This is a person who still has it, going on upstairs, who still has a sense of humor, who doesn't miss a beat. This woman, Kaitlan Collins, she grilled him like a fish on the barbecue, but he was cool, calm, and collected, and he answered back So that was my main takeaway, that this is the Trump that we remember from 2016.
And his expressions were pretty good too.
Yeah, yeah,
I'll tell you what.
yeah.
Well, you know, this idea that he gets blamed for overemphasizing a rigged election, I think the tactics of the Trump people and the Republicans, I never agreed with it because it didn't fit what I might have done.
Yeah.
Because he said they're stealing the election, or they at least made people think that he's saying, well, they're stolen the election and we got to get to the bottom of this. And yet I think, and in their sense, he wanted to even now reverse the election.
Yeah.
You know, it was done and over, done with, and he wanted to reverse it. So that sounded a little more radical for the political people. And I think, I always thought, you know what the approach ought to be? I think we have a right to count all the votes.
Yeah.
Wasn't it down to the bottom line? I mean, when they were complaining about, you know, all the disruptions in the way they were counting, just count all the votes. And yeah, it turned out to be, did they rig it? Do they want to turn back and reverse the election, which was an impossibility?
Yeah.
So anyway, it has been a top item, but I don't think Trump lost any points on it.
Yeah, no, but I think you're right. I mean, the approach, the rhetoric that he used was just wrong. He didn't have to say it that way. He could have countered by saying, no, I agree with you all. Every vote should count. That's why we need to count every vote.
Right.
You know, something like this would have worked better than this, you know, but he can be very stubborn. We'll have a couple of clips, and if we put the first one up, we're using as a general guide our helpful friends at Zero Hedge because they have the top 10 moments from Trump's CNN town hall. We did not take all 10, but there's a couple we wanted to touch on. In the first one, of course, this is one of the early ones she talked about, Kaitlan Collins talked about, is, you know, why do you keep complaining about 2020, the rigged elections? And if you go to the next one, they had a little focus group afterward, and they asked the people there, why won't Trump stop talking about 2020? And the voter said, well, the first question you asked him was about 2020. So the very first thing they ask him is about why you keep saying it was rigged? Why won't you accept it? And then they say, well, why do you keep talking about it? So I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, so that was good. There's a few other items there. The other one that's a big issue in the news, and the article mentions that, and that's the January 6th thing.
Yeah.
How abused that has been in the media. There's so many things about what happened there that, and Trump got a lot of them in, but I don't think he got all the points. He mentioned it, but I think the tremendous abuse was all this nonsense, this rigging of the committee, the investigation. You know, it was a one-sided investigation, and the denial of looking at the films that were available. That doesn't happen in any trial.
Yeah.
You know, the opposition is supposed to know what the prosecution is doing, but not in this case. They weren't allowed. Now they're getting to see it, and you know, it turns out that there were some justifications for the complaints. You know, and of course that could lead up to the one big problem that the film has helped, and that's what happened with the killing of Ashley Babbitt. That today, again, was part of the tragedy of the misinformation, which was democratically the Democrat Party, along with the FBI and the media, that perpetuated that.
One of the things that I thought was hilarious in the reaction to all of the things that Trump said were the various quote-unquote fact-checked organizations. And so I entered just a couple of key search terms into Google or whatever, and there will be like what he said and then 50 different organizations, fact-check, he was wrong, fact. It just shows how politicized the fact-check is, the whole thing. But put up that next one, because now you mentioned the January 6th, and this is, I think, a pretty triumphant moment for Trump. And this shows how well prepared he was. Now, this is not I didn't use the audio clip, but just the main point, because Kaitlan Collins says to Trump, why did it take you 3 hours to tell those rioters to go home on January 6th? And what he did was amazing. He simply reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a printout of his tweets. And he said, I don't believe I did. Checks his notes. On January 5th, the day before, I said, please support our Capitol Police and law enforcement. They're on the side of our country. Stay peaceful. And then he went on to say, as I was giving my speech, as they were there, I told them to be peaceful, and peacefully protest. So he basically destroyed her whole thesis of her question, which is that it took him 3 hours to tell people to go home.
Yeah, so
I thought that was pretty strong.
He definitely was and got back on him. But I found also an interesting thing, because it's not a yes and a no, and that is, would you what would you do if you're president? Would you pardon the people?
Yeah,
there?
that was good.
And so I guess they were expecting him to blunt out, yeah, they're all going to get pardoned.
Yeah.
But his answer was very dignified in that he would study it, and the people who did not commit, acts of violence, yes, and that would be a lot of them.
Yeah.
But how they've been treated? Just think that how they've been imprisoned without due process of law, and they're still there suffering from it. The families have suffered, but it doesn't seem like the civil liberties of the Trump opponents really care too much about that. So it would be, and I believe he would follow up on that promise. I think if he becomes president, he's going to sit down and look at it and have somebody say, well, these 10 or 15 people went over the top, and that's it. And but to do this for years, going on now, so that whole thing is a tragedy, because they always wanted to say that this was a part of a insurrection.
Yeah.
This was bad stuff. It was insurrection. And then once again, there was a policeman shot a demonstrator. A policeman. Yeah, the Capitol Hill policeman shot a woman.
Yeah.
Was she getting ready? Did she have a gun? Was she pointing a gun? What was she doing? Oh, they found out afterwards she didn't have a gun. And but he said he was frightened about it. It looked like there could be danger ahead. But they investigated it. The Capitol Hill Police and the other organization, they said no. He had a right to be frightened about that. So he just fires and kills somebody like that.
And I think you're right. Because Trump addressing January 6th and saying that, I'm inclined to pardon them. And actually, you can put this next tweet up, because this is where the exchange took place. He was asked by a voter in New Hampshire, will you pardon the January 6 rioters who were convicted of federal offenses? He said, I'm inclined to pardon many of them. And he clarified it, as you say. Some of them went over the top and they should be punished, but most of them didn't, and he'd be inclined to pardon them. But what I think this does is this undermines one of the most sacred texts in the Church of the Woke, which is that we had an insurrection. We've got to keep these people down. In fact, as we've talked about on the show before, there was an insurrection, but it was Blinken and the CIA having an insurrection on the laptop issue. But it undermines this sacred truth that can never be spoken, and certainly never on CNN, that there was an insurrection and we have to guard against it.
I think since the Republicans got some films on here, there was an indication, maybe it was Tucker that was showing them, and then when it started to show that there were plants in there, FBI plants and maybe CIA plants, they were taken off, they were taken down. So I think that's one of the biggest thing that should look at the investigation is to find out how many were there. The Republicans have been asking that from the beginning, but that to me is a big deal. That is part of a coup where the police become crooked and they infiltrate everything, and then then they stir up trouble in order to frame somebody through an entrapment. See what they did. So and that, of course, I think has been around for a long time, that whole principle. But it's a sort of epidemic now, and they've used this. So I think the investigation, I hope the Republicans really work hard to find out how many federal officials were involved and how many, and get all the films together. What were their activities? And maybe they were guiding a few people and saying, look at the insurrectionists and helping them out. Who knows what they were doing? But when there was some acts of violence, when somebody's climbing up on a wall, it'd be interesting to see. Well, was the FBI agent nearby there?
Yeah.
Did he get the ladder for him?
Yeah.
That sort of thing. That to me is a sad situation.
Well, what's the fellow's name? Jason Changeley or something? The fellow with the horns on his head. He was let out because the tape showed that they were letting him in the rooms. He didn't break in.
Right. Finally,
Wonderful.
common sense came about.
Yeah. Well, here's the next one. You're talking about Babbitt, and I think this is an example of how Trump was very, very good and deflected some of these pointed questions. Because Collins, of course, was going on and on and on, doing her own fact checks. And she said, talking about January 6th, over 140 officers were injured. And Trump said, and a person named Ashley Babbitt was killed. You know what? She was killed and she shouldn't have been killed. And that thug that killed her, there was no reason to shoot her. Now that's stronger language, I think, than a lot of people would use about the officer who did it. But he brought it up. What about this? What about this? What about shooting this unarmed woman? And I think it was an interesting way of parrying that blow that she tried to land.
Yes.
So.
They briefly mentioned Mike Pence, and they hit it hard about the separation. Trump fighting with Pence, and Pence not doing what Trump told him to do. But on the surface, the argument is who should settle this, and Trump was arguing it should be sent back to the states. And the details of that, I don't know timing and all this is, but once it's over and done with, it's hard to resuscitate an election. But if you have an argument, like we had with George Bush and Gore, that there are some very good jurists that believe that how did that get settled just by a Supreme Court ruling?
Yeah, that was
7
weird.
people getting together, one vote, I think. And so this is the one thing that they could do, and I think Trump's advice was good advice. Send it back, and Pence wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
But that should have gotten some serious consideration when there's a real argument that if we're at an impasse or in a way that's a tied vote, we can't resolve it, and we've been counting and doing all these things. All right, we're sending it to the House of Representatives, and each state has a vote.
Yeah. And I think probably that's another case where Trump's bombastic style didn't do him any good, because of the way he approached it. But yeah, maybe you're right. I mean, because it was pretty weird the way the Supreme Court did in 2000. Well, the next one that talked about was Ukraine, and I think he was particularly good on Ukraine. And we have a couple of audio clips. If we can do that first one, that first audio clip on Ukraine of how he was asked and how he responded. We should probably full screen that. And watch the whole clip. Oh no, the 45 seconds of this one.
Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I don't think in terms of winning and losing. I think in terms of getting it settled so we stop killing all these people and breaking down this country.
Good.
What do you, can I just follow up on that? You said you don't think in terms of winning and losing. Mr. President, can I just follow up on that because that's a really important statement that you just made there. Can you say if you want Ukraine or Russia to win this war?
I want everybody to stop dying. They're dying, Russians and Ukrainians. I want them to stop dying. And I'll have that done. I'll have that done in 24 hours. I'll have it done. You need the power of the presidency to do it.
But you won't say that you want Ukraine to win. You
know what I'll say? I'll say this.
So we have her, and this is really a critique of the entire way that the news media handles these events, treating it like a sporting event. Which team are you on? Do you want Ukraine to win or do you want Russia to win? And again, Trump didn't fall for it. He said, I don't look at it that way. I look at it as people are dying and I want to stop them dying and I want to do whatever it takes to help them stop dying. And she couldn't let up with this because she wanted him to say, well, I'm for Putin, I'm Putin's puppet, which he didn't say. He said, I want to end this war. And I think you can see from the reaction of the audience, they appreciated that more nuanced approach to the issue.
If I had been in that situation, I would have accepted what Trump said, but I would have added something when he asked, who who do you want to win the war? Who do you want to lose the war then?
Yeah.
And I would say I am not rooting for NATO.
Yeah.
You know, it's a war between NATO and Russia, and bring up the whole subject, how to get started. But there's no reason. I can't believe what I'm saying would be better than what he did. He did a good job. But I would say he's the commander-in-chief.
Yeah.
If he wants to end the war, because it's 100% dependent on us, to get it started. Well, in 2014, it continues, and we're still adding more and more money. Stop the money and bring the troops home, and he could do that with an announcement very, very quickly. If that announcement was made and everybody believed it, I'll tell you what, the fighting would stop.
Yeah.
The fighting would stop. They might want to save their fighting for another day, but they'd have to do some realignment. But I would vote to not provide a victory for NATO.
Yeah. And actually, the chief diplomat of the EU, Joseph Borrell, said that as much just the other day. He said, if this fighting would stop in a couple of days if we stop giving weapons, because that's the only thing keeping them going. But he was saying that's why we need to give more. So he had the opposite conclusion. But I thought, and I had not seen this gentleman before, Representative Donalds. I think he was very, very good on CNN. If we can play the second clip, how he handled the Ukraine issue when asked about Trump's response, I think was good. And I was pretty impressed if you listen to this gentleman. I'm not sure where he's from. He's a Republican U.S. representative.
With respect to Ukraine, I totally disagree. He did not say he was just going to give over Ukraine the way you intimate, Van. He did not say that.
He didn't say
what he said.
He did not say that he would stand for a victory.
What he said is that he would actually look for a solution to end it quickly. He put 24 hours on it, but let's be very clear. What Joe Biden has done has been a disaster.
That was pretty
Very
good. Good
yes.
response.
I think he's from Florida.
Yeah. Oh, from Florida. Yeah. He did a good job on that. Well, the other one that we were going to talk about is the inflation thing, I think. Unless you had one before that.
And he was inflation, I've heard about the problem.
Yeah, we know it well. But he was asked by one of the voters, if we can put that next one on, that next clip on, just the next tweet from Tim Young is the one. I know I've got you so busy back there, but no, this is not an audio one. Trump is asked about how to curb inflation and the record costs of living, and his response: "Drill, baby, drill. We have more liquid gold under our feet than any other nation, and these stupid fools ended it." i.e. ended drilling. I thought that was a pretty clever response.
Yeah. This is an opportunity, and I had several of those in the few debates that I had been in, to bring up the subject, which I think is so pervasive. None of this stuff would have to be bothered with if we had honest money, because there would be no money. Nobody's going to donate money to go and send our kids over to Ukraine or try to, instigate a war with Russia and all this nonsense. But the policy, though, is, the subject is has to be dealt with with the Federal Reserve and, the money supply. Now, what Trump talked about is drill, baby, drill. That is good politics.
Yeah,
I'll tell you, that is, because I would agree that nonsense added fuel to the fire of inflation. The price inflation. This will push up prices, but that's secondary, and it's a combination, and they put it together. The same way with the spending on COVID. COVID doesn't cause the inflation, but the reaction to COVID means print.
Yeah.
And that's probably what I say. Drill, baby, stop the presses, stop the presses, stop the presses. So it was a good answer, but probably, and he could have taken as much time as he wanted, but I think it's so important on the incentives on why that happens. But a lot of people think the inflation comes if there's a drought and a lot of crops die and prices are going up, we're going to have inflation. No, you're going to have rising prices for a certain reason. The worst thing that we're going through right now is we have the inflation because the Fed has printed so much money especially since 2008, and also on top of that, then we have Biden coming in there and destroying the production of energy and all this. So I like to sort the two out and deal with both of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it gives you an idea that there is a solution. We can get out of this, and maybe part of it is is oil. But now let's talk a little bit about the reactions to it, and there were some interesting ones. The first one I had to pull up is John Nolte, and he's a right-wing guy. I think he writes for Breitbart, and he had a pretty interesting article about it. And of course, he liked it because he likes Trump. But I think he made really good point, Dr. Paul. If we can put that next one up, because I think this really captures. It certainly was my impression. He said Trump pulling copies of his timestamped tweets to prove Collins a liar was far beyond ownage. And then he went on to say, best of all, in an increasingly uptight and fascist culture, Trump made us laugh, and only fools underestimate the power of such things. It was glorious. And I think that was a simple point, that his real triumph is that he made people laugh. He made Americans laugh. And that was no small thing, as he says, in our uptight culture. But, Dr. Paul, someone wasn't as happy as they might have been, and that is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. If we can put her up, she was mad, not at Trump. That's a given. Go to the next one if you don't mind. I'm going to skip that one. She was mad at CNN. And this is interesting. She says CNN should be ashamed of themselves. They've lost total control of this town hall to again be manipulated into platforming election disinformation, defenses of January 6th, and a public attack on a sexual abuse victim. The audience is cheering him on and laughing at the host. She's mad. And do the next one. She's even more mad when she follows up and she says, this falls squarely on CNN. Everyone here saw what was going on. Instead, they put a sexual abuse victim in harm's way, et cetera, et cetera. So, I don't know, Dr. Paul. AOC is pretty mad at CNN about this.
You're feeling sorry for her? Hardly. Well, you know, there's they interviewed another very, very well-known Republican, so this is important to listen to this. And this comes from Chris Christie, and I don't think he's very friendly with Trump, even though they used to be pseudo-friends. But he had a few words to say. They weren't exactly flattering toward Trump. And here's his statement. He'd have a different approach. He says, I think Trump, is a coward. I think he's a puppet of Putin. Oh my, Christie responded. I really do. I don't know why, to tell you the truth, I can't figure it out, but there's no other conclusion to come to. He wouldn't say last night that Ukraine should win the war. Easy task. I mean, I was stunned. To me, it was the most stunning moment of the whole debate. If you won't say that you think Ukraine should win the war, I don't know where you stand with Putin. Oh boy, do you think we should reassess ourselves? He's a strong voice there, but I don't think he's going to be much competition for Trump.
No.
I don't. They said he's still thinking about running.
Yeah. Unless it's a hamburger eating contest, then he might do well in that one. But you know, he's mad because Trump is not endorsing the neocon thing, which is we got to take sides, we got to win. And you know, the Democrats did that for 4 years. He's Putin's puppet. I looked it up after I looked at that Christie quote and see how popular he was in places like New Jersey. 70% of the New Jersey voters don't want him to run. So there you go. I don't even think his relatives want him to run. I did have one more audio clip to go, and I know that you can't end the show without listening to how Jake Tapper viewed this whole thing. So listen to Jake. He was not happy with his own network either for giving Trump the opportunity. Listen to Jake here.
He called a black law enforcement officer a thug. He said people here in Washington, D.C. at Chinatown don't speak English. He attacked Kaitlan as a nasty woman because she was trying to get him to answer a question. Perhaps most chillingly, the day after a 9-person jury of his peers in New York found him liable for sexual battery and defamation and ordered him to pay writer E. Jean Carroll $5 million, he made fun of her account of her sexual assault. And many in the audience laughed.
And applauded.
I just thought that was funny. They were downtrodden.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that case is over.
Yeah.
because there were some pretty strong arguments that didn't hold, like she didn't remember what year it happened, and didn't call anybody, all this stuff.
Ugly.
And so we haven't heard the last of that, but that'll probably go on. He'll challenge it, he'll appeal it, and it'll go on and on. But and then somebody else said, I don't know why she's doing this. Oh, it's on principle. But they were telling that we should win $5 million, and somebody said, well, guess where that money's going to go? It's going to go to taxes. It's going to go to the attorneys. It's going to go to this, and she's not going to end up with it. But she's doing this on principle. Political principles. Somebody's going to be, very happy that she did that. She didn't have a clear memory of that, but her memory became clearer the closer we got to the election.
Yeah, isn't that amazing how that happens?
And we know personally very little of that thing. I didn't even follow the case, but there's a lot of nonsense. All these cases go up. It's just amazing, this whole thing, how Trump, all this stuff just runs off him. It doesn't ever faze him, because even from his first night that he had a debate, in 2016, they thought, well, he's over with, when he was challenging Kelly then, the hostess on it. And then he attacked McCain.
Yeah, that's funny. That's hilarious.
And he went on, and it's just that I think people were sick and tired of nobody being allowed to answer back because it was politically incorrect. I think political correctness and incorrectness became secondary.
Yeah.
It was sort of this idea, people don't have the right just to run over you and nobody object. And I think that's what Trump symbolizes, that there's a limit to what he's put up to. And people are angry and upset. So they gather around an individual that is not afraid to blunt it out and say it. And he comes up with a lot of good statements, even though he oversteps his bounds sometimes. But I think people have gotten sick and tired of this radical political correctness. Matter of fact, it's gotten worse in the last couple of years with this polygenderism and all the nonsense going on. That this is just a total disaster.
Yeah, well, we're not endorsing him, but we think he put on a good performance last night, and I think he won over some people, or at least he caused the people that were wavering to say, I remember what it was like. But before I close, I do want to again mention the sponsor of our program for May, and of course that is 4patriots.com. It's a great company to get yourself prepared for anything, whether it's survival food, RV and camping, home and garden, or solar generators. And they put out a Patriot Power Generator 1800 and a 2000, depending on what need you want. And the great thing about solar generators, as opposed to gas generators, is that they are 100% fume free. There can be some danger with carbon monoxide fumes, of course, in a gas generator. But not only are they fume free, they are silent and safe. They are as quiet as a laptop computer. And they're within the price range of all Americans now. You can upgrade these things. You can run your refrigerator on them. You can run your phone. You can run your telephone, your medical devices. And the best thing about it is right now, if you go to 4patriots.com, and we will put the link in the description, and use the code RON, they will give you 10% off your first purchase of anything in the store, including one of these big bad boys. That's a pretty good savings if you look at what it is. So go to 4patriots.com, enter RON to get 10% off. And thanks again, 4patriots.com, for sponsoring the show today. And my final word, Dr. Paul, as I close my week out, is to remind our viewers and everyone out there of our conference coming up. And let's put up that final clip if we can. June 3rd, it's coming up fast. It's going to be a great event. We're going to talk about, well, a lot of the stuff we talk about on the show. If we can put that final clip up, there we go. They lie. Nihilism and the war on truth. And it's from everywhere, from COVID to the censorship industrial complex, to the media, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to have a great event here in Houston. I will include in the link description of this program. As I mentioned, we are keeping ticket prices the same as we had last year when we had our last sold out event in Houston, because we want you there. So check it out. Dr. Paul?
Well, you know, this has been a problem, and I like thinking about it and try to sorting it all out. But it seems like lying is permissible, more so now than ever. It used to be you tell a lie and, you know, they'd make fun of you. But there's a new religion, it's called wokeism. Matter of fact, they literally preach and believe that lying is okay. And so at least they're up front telling the truth that they like to lie. But, you know, it's something that I think is so important just in every part of our lives, you know, whether it's social, religious, personalities that people have to be believed or things don't go so well. And, you know, I think that we of course don't, endorse certain candidates, but we do talk about their positions, and we talked about Trump because he was in the news. But you know, we've talked about one other candidate that I think we're going to continue to talk about because he's fascinating more and more people, and that's RFK, Robert Kennedy Jr. And I keep thinking, you know, he has some things there that he's can overlap with Trump, but he might emphasize a lot different on civil liberties, and the foreign policies would be different. So I would like to, in my own mind, think about what is Trump saying that is politically good and more politically necessary to say, and along with some of the ideas of RFK, because there's something fascinating about that. And when you think of the Kennedy family that's gone on, it's been around, but I think RFK has adjusted the Kennedy phenomenon, the Kennedy beliefs, in a way where he has, looks to me, I hope he's not offended by saying, he looks more libertarian than the Kennedy family was in the past. So I think bringing those two together and melding them together might be a benefit politically. I do want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.